When people grow used to your presence, they forget your weight. Step away, and they remember what your silence once held. People tend to notice what they no longer have. It is a strange habit of human nature. We overlook what is in front of us, then suddenly praise it the moment it steps out of reach. This pattern shows up everywhere. A CEO worker's steady effort becomes obvious only when they take time off. A friend seems more important the moment they stop answering messages. A public figure appears wiser after they retreat from constant attention. This shift is not magic. It reflects something Machiavelli understood centuries ago. When you remove yourself from view, people start to measure your worth with fresh eyes. Machiavelli spent his life studying how influence rises, collapses, and reshapes itself. He watched leaders who stayed too visible lose their authority because they exhausted the audience's patience. He also watched quieter figures grow powerful simply because they were not always in the spotlight. His conclusion was simple and sharp. People respect what feels scarce, and they undervalue what feels endlessly available. This insight sits at the center of the idea that disappearing, even temporarily, increases your value. This video breaks down how this principle works, why Machiavelli's thinking supports it, and how leaders, creators, and everyday people can see the same pattern in their own lives. The goal is not to promote manipulation. The goal is to understand how human attention works, and why stepping back at the right moment can shift your presence from background noise to something people look toward with real interest. 1. Machiavelli's core idea about presence and power. Machiavelli believed that power depends heavily on how people see you. In The Prince, he explains that a leader's image has as much influence as their actual choices. When someone stands in front of others too often, their presence loses weight. Familiarity turns strong figures into ordinary ones because constant exposure softens their impact. Machiavelli argued that leaders should manage their appearances carefully, letting people see them enough to believe in their strength, but not so much that their presence becomes predictable. He understood that human beings respond more strongly to what they imagine than to what they constantly observe. A prince who appears less often leaves room for his people to form their own ideas about him. That distance creates a kind of mystique. People fill the gaps with their own expectations, hopes, and memories. Instead of seeing his flaws, they hold on to the traits they admire. Machiavelli believed this psychological distance could protect a leader from unnecessary criticism and keep their authority intact. This principle also connects to the idea of scarcity. Machiavelli noted that people appreciate what they might lose. A ruler who is always present risks becoming easy to ignore. A ruler who appears strategically at key moments becomes someone people watch closely. This contrast is not accidental. It is a deliberate use of presence that reinforces power without demanding constant effort. 2. Why absence creates value. Absence forces people to look again. When someone steps away, the usual routine shifts, and people begin to feel the gap. This feeling creates awareness. It pushes others to consider what that person used to contribute, how often they relied on them, and what has changed since they left. That reflection alone increases perceived value. People start to realize what they previously overlooked. Machiavelli understood this before modern psychology gave it a name. Loss sharpens attention. Another reason absence creates value is that it stops people from taking you for granted. Constant presence can make even exceptional qualities blend into the background. When someone withdraws, those qualities become vivid again. Reliability becomes noticeable. Kindness feels rare. Expertise feels important. In this way, absence works like contrast. It highlights what was already there but had faded into routine. Absence also shifts power because it gives the person who steps back control over the rhythm of interaction. They are no longer reacting to others. They choose when to appear, when to speak, and when to engage. This selective presence makes every action stronger. It shows confidence rather than neediness. Machiavelli believed that nothing weakens influence faster than the appearance of desperation. By stepping away, a leader shows they do not need constant affirmation, and that alone increases their authority. 3. The psychology behind scarcity and perception. Scarcity shapes judgment more than people realize. When something becomes limited or harder to access, the mind automatically assigns more value to it. This principle drives everything from economics to relationships. Machiavelli did not use modern terms, but he observed this dynamic closely. A leader who is always available becomes common in the eyes of the public. A leader who limits access becomes someone people respect, because they assume that limited access signals importance. Scarcity shifts attention, and attention shifts value. Human beings are also wired to notice change. When a person who is usually present suddenly becomes absent, that change disrupts expectations. The brain searches for an explanation. It evaluates the person's role, qualities, and contributions. This mental effort alone increases the sense of importance attached to that person. Machiavelli understood that people rarely evaluate something that feels stable, but they will analyze something that feels uncertain or changing. Absence creates that moment of evaluation. Another psychological factor is projection. When someone steps away, others fill the gap with assumptions, stories, and interpretations. That space allows people to imagine the absent person in a more favorable light than constant presence would allow. Imperfections fade because they are no longer visible. Strengths become exaggerated because people remember them without contradiction. Machiavelli knew that imagination can work in a leader's favor if the leader allows distance to shape perception. 4. Machiavellian strategy and the timing of withdrawal. Machiavelli did not promote disappearing entirely. Instead, he focused on timing. A leader should withdraw only when their presence risks losing impact. If someone shows up too frequently, their actions start blending into the background. Machiavelli believed that strategic withdrawal renews influence. By stepping back at the right moment, a leader resets expectations. People begin to anticipate their return. That anticipation increases interest and attention, which strengthens the leader's position when they eventually reappear. This strategy works because timing shapes meaning. If a leader withdraws right before they become overexposed, the absence feels intentional and strong. If they wait too long, withdrawal feels like retreat or uncertainty. Machiavelli emphasized that a leader must understand the mood of the people. They must sense when their presence is becoming predictable or when criticism is growing. A temporary absence can break those patterns and give people a chance to reassess the leader more positively. Machiavelli also recognized that a well-timed disappearance can protect a leader during fragile moments. When a situation grows volatile, being overly visible can make a leader a target for blame or anger. Stepping back shifts attention elsewhere and gives the leader time to regroup, rebuild support, and re-enter with a stronger image. Disappearance is not escape. It is a form of resetting the board, so the leader returns with a better strategic position. 5. Leadership and the power of controlled distance. Leaders who maintain a balance between accessibility and distance often maintain stronger respect from their followers. If a leader is constantly around, constantly talking, and constantly reacting, their presence begins to feel routine. Controlled distance changes that dynamic. It gives the leader a sense of gravity. When they speak, it matters. When they appear, people pay attention. Machiavelli believed that part of being effective is avoiding the appearance of being ordinary, and distance helps preserve that distinction. Distance does not mean detachment. A good leader stays informed and involved, but they avoid inserting themselves into every moment. They choose the right situations to step into, and allow others to handle the rest. This selectiveness sends a subtle message that their presence has weight and purpose. It prevents burnout among followers because it avoids the feeling of being micromanaged. It also builds trust, because people learn that when the leader does show up, it is for something meaningful. Controlled distance also supports long-term stability. Leaders who maintain a constant presence risk exhausting their audience. Over time, familiarity can turn into frustration. By stepping back at intervals, a leader allows people to breathe, reflect, and appreciate their guidance more fully. Machiavelli saw leadership as a balance between engagement and restraint. Distance is not a weakness, it is a strategic tool for sustaining influence without overwhelming the people who depend on it. 6. Absence in political life. Politics runs on perception. A politician who is constantly in the public eye risks wearing out the audience. Every speech, every interview, and every appearance becomes another chance to be criticized. Machiavelli understood that too much exposure can turn even a skilled leader into a familiar target. A brief withdrawal can shift the tone. When a political figure steps back, the public starts to compare current events to the stability or leadership they once offered. That comparison often works in the absent leader's favor because distance softens mistakes and highlights strengths. History offers many examples of leaders who became more respected after stepping away. Their absence gave supporters time to rebuild admiration and gave critics less material to attack. Machiavelli would argue that this is not accidental. It is rooted in the way people remember. People tend to forget flaws when they aren't constantly reminded of them. They also tend to idealize what is no longer present. A politician who returns after a period of quiet often finds themselves welcomed with more interest than before. Even in modern politics, controlled absence remains powerful. Public figures release fewer statements, avoid unnecessary debates, or reduce their social media presence when the moment calls for it. This silence can create anticipation. It forces the public and the media to speculate, and that speculation increases relevance. Machiavelli would see this as a clever play. The leader doesn't disappear out of fear. They disappear to increase the weight of their next move. 7. Influence in workplaces and professional environments. The idea that disappearing increases value does not apply only to rulers. It shows up in workplaces every day. Employees who constantly volunteer for every task or insert themselves into every discussion often become overlooked. Their efforts blend into the routine. In contrast, those who contribute meaningfully and then step back create a stronger impression. People begin to associate them with quality rather than quantity. Machiavelli's insight appears here in a simple way. If you are always available, others assume your time has little value. Strategic absence can also help professionals avoid burnout and protect their reputation. When someone takes on too much, errors become more visible. Fatigue affects performance. People begin to focus on the mistakes rather than the contributions. By stepping back at the right moment, a professional preserves the integrity of their work. They allow others to notice what happens when they are not there. This often leads to renewed appreciation for their skills, reliability, and leadership. In managerial roles, controlled distance becomes even more important. A manager who hovers over every detail loses authority. Their presence becomes a sign of insecurity rather than strength. A manager who steps back, delegates, and appears only when necessary gains respect. Their guidance feels intentional and thoughtful. Machiavelli would say that this kind of leadership keeps the focus on results rather than personality. It allows the manager's influence to grow because it is tied to strategic action rather than constant noise. 8. Social dynamics and personal relationships. Friendships and relationships follow the same pattern that Machiavelli observed in politics. When someone is always available, always present, and always responding, their presence can start to feel expected rather than appreciated. People may unconsciously begin to take them for granted. A gentle step back disrupts that pattern. It reminds others that this person is not a constant fixture, but an individual with their own value and boundaries. That reminder often deepens respect and strengthens the relationship in the long run. Absence also clarifies intentions. When someone steps away, the people around them reveal how much they truly value the connection. Those who care will reach out. Those who don't will drift. This clarity is powerful because it protects emotional energy. Machiavelli understood that relationships based on neediness or excessive familiarity weaken a person's influence. On the other hand, relationships built on mutual respect and healthy distance grow stronger and more stable. There is also a personal benefit to occasional withdrawal. It gives individuals space to reflect, reset, and realign their priorities. Constant interaction can blur self-awareness. Stepping back restores a sense of identity outside the expectations of others. When someone returns with renewed clarity, their presence feels fresh and confident. Machiavelli would argue that this internal stability translates into external strength. People respond more positively to someone who knows their value and refuses to depend on constant validation. Conclusion: Machiavelli never wrote a chapter titled "Disappear and Everyone Starts Valuing You," but the idea runs through his work. He understood people well enough to see that presence alone is not power. Influence grows when it is managed, not when it is forced. When someone steps back intentionally and with purpose, others begin to notice what they contributed. They remember the strength, insight, or stability that felt ordinary when constantly displayed. Absence sharpens memory, and memory shapes respect. This principle applies far beyond the world of princes and politics. It appears in workplaces, friendships, media, leadership, and personal identity. When you disappear for a moment, you give people room to think, feel, and evaluate. You also give yourself room to breathe. Machiavelli's insight is not about manipulation, it is about rhythm. Too much presence dulls impact. Too little presence disconnects you. The power lies in knowing when to step forward and when to step back. That balance shifts perception in ways that constant effort never could. In the end, disappearance is not about hiding, it is a strategy that reveals value by removing it from view. When handled with intention, it restores weight to your presence and strength to your voice. Machiavelli teaches that human nature follows patterns, and those patterns reward the person who understands timing. When you return after a thoughtful absence, you do not come back smaller. You come back clearer, stronger, and far more valued than before.